Oh, what's that? You've never seen a Gorgon wear glasses before? Well, I need to keep myself from turning people like you to stone, and these amber glasses kind of serve that function. If you asked me the science of it, I wouldn't really be able to answer you, but that is why I'm wearing them. Hello everyone! Sorry not sorry about my most recent video. I am cringe and I don't care who knows it. And unfortunately that is now everybody's fucking problem. If you're new around here, hi, how are you doing today? I'm Kat and I like to make animation-ready models. This is month 2 of my descent into Voyage of the Unicorn / Basset Madness, and if you can't tell based on this new VTuber model, this month has been themed around the mythical creatures that the Basset encounters. I had originally planned on making both this model and a bonus model, because this character doesn't really need or use any props, but honestly the latter half of this month has been absolutely jam-packed with personal junk. I've barely had time to make this video, let alone the model itself. Patrons already super know that I basically fell out of 3 different frying pans and into 3 hotter and hotter fires. It's been a lot, and I'm sorry the video's later than usual, but I'm hoping this coming month will be kinder. Anyway, let's introduce the subject of this character design session. Ladies, gentlemen, and NBs, you know them, you love them. We all stan a cryptic, chimeric queen. It's the Sphinx. Now, James C Christensen originally painted her as this very white-coated woman / lion / eagle. Her character in the book is deeply romantic, and she has this flirtationship with the manticore that's on board the vessel that only comes across in the illustrations that I found deeply amusing as a kid. She seemed very soft and unobtrusive, very agreeable. The white romantic woman is at least very in line with how ancient Greeks and slightly less ancient Renaissance painters depicted this creature, with a calm, placid smile, if not a deep, deep yearning for love, generally a man. But Greece isn't the only culture to have conceptualized this specific mishmash of body parts. The ancient Swana region also had their own ideas about sphinxes and their places in culture, and those inspirations seem a bit more forward-facing in the TV movie depiction. The movie's version is a black woman with very curly shoulder-length hair, wearing a somewhat generic fantasy breastplate. Not quite the amount of characterization that her book counterpart had, but she was at least more interesting in terms of character design. I kind of wanted to marry these contrasting concepts from across the ancient world, so I got to work on some studies. I landed on this idea of a base sphinx, with the eagle wings, the human torso on a cat's rear body and legs, with a more cat-like face, your slit pupils, your cat ears, and give her paw pads on her elongated hands and forelegs. I decided to tie her character design more closely to Egypt in particular, so her wing shapes are closer to the way they're drawn in hieroglyphics. They're sharper and longer than the way I normally model wings, and also a lot less fluffy and soft looking. I even decided on a little braided bob wig moment for her. Everything was coming together super well except for the face. See, I kind of wanted her to look like Cleopatra, who historically was Macedonian, but Queen of Egypt. I figured it would make a good compromise, because who better to base this iconic creature off of than an Egyptian queen who was also Greek? But this opened a way bigger can of worms than I felt qualified for. My Google search results were roughly 2/8 of Gal Gadot's casting controversy, 2/8 of historians discussing her racial phenotype, 1/8 terrible AI renders, 1/8 images of Liz Taylor in the movie from the 60s, 1/8 facial recreations from recovered ancient busts, and 1/8 Egyptian coins. All in all, the Googling was fruitless, and I felt less and less that I should even approach this discourse, frankly. I scrapped that idea completely, and decided to just draw her as a black woman, similar to the movie's depiction. It felt in the moment to be the most culturally sensitive, and honestly I don't feel like batting off comments saying I'm whitewashing an icon who left her paw prints all over the ancient world. She's dark-skinned in my final design, and I think that suits her perfectly. When it came time to move to the final character design, I decided to base her outfit on this layered dress that I found while googling ancient Mesopotamian fashions. This is part of a larger set of historical designs by concept artist Ben Jor that I found on ArtStation, so shout out to Ben, this layered dress rocks. I've made sure to link his work in the description in case you wanted to check it out for yourselves. Her layered necklace was inspired by similar Mesopotamian styles of jewelry, but the earrings, circlet, and bracelet are all Grecian inspired. I hope this was an interesting look at my design process. I know I tend to skip over the nitty-gritty of this whole part of it, like the design part, but I felt it was really important to explain how we got from this thing here to this, the final product. Now, let's hop into the process. You'll notice that process here, I kind of wasn't very organized about how I went about making the model after finishing up with the modeling. I had to test the rig a whole fucking lot, basically, to make sure the deformations looked good, but because I've been a little bit all over the place this month, I completely forgot to record a bunch of weight painting. Sorry in advance. We're kind of going to skimp out on a lot of the modeling details here until we get to the legs, because it's the same approach I take to all of my humanoid characters. Futz with a cube until it's a head, extend, futz with the resulting shape until it's a torso, try to keep everything similar to the concept art I've already made. This will only diverge around the legs and paws, and since I haven't ever uploaded any process videos where I do specifically digidegrade legs like these, I think focusing on that aspect will likely be better. I'm totally not doing it because I'm short on time and I don't want to have to reiterate all the steps that you guys have seen me do up until this point. I'll link the playlist in the description if you want to see the specifics of how I make a face. Something I've done here that I don't normally do is give the arms that, like, twist that arms actually have when you hold them out straight. Because bones are really stupid, and the human skeleton is really, really stupid. So when your arms are out straight, the bones actually twist over each other as opposed to just lying parallel, and that's not always visible unless you're looking for it, but I wanted to challenge myself a bit with this detail since she has her guns out anyway. I added paw pads to her hands here by just insetting and extruding each bit that would have them, pulling them down or inwards in the case of the thumb. Since I made her without the bottom bit intact, the two edges from the innermost section in the front to of the model with their corresponding vertices on the back by selecting and hitting F, and then subdividing that by 3 or 4. It's up to you how curved you want that. I gave her 7, because cats have a very rounded out hip, crotch, tummy area. From there, it's largely the same as how I do normal legs. I manipulated those verts around the leg hole to give her a sort of panty shape, and then grabbed the entire edge and then duplicated them, moving them around so they hit where the legs should hit on the model. This is where it gets kind of silly. I then extrude down and out twice, in accordance with the reference image to create the knee and upper leg. To start on the ankle, I take that second extrusion's edge and hit circle in the Loop Tools menu. Then duplicate that further away on the y-axis, but not by too much, and extend and close that off to finish the ankle structure. I give mine a bit of a bony ledge at the back, because that's something I've noticed in cats, but it's totally up to you if you want to do the same. That's just a detail that I wanted to put there. I then grabbed like 5 faces at the back of this ankle bit, made the verts a circle again, and then began to extrude downwards to create that big foot. I decided here to give it a bit of wideness just to exaggerate the proportions of it, because I want her to have these like really big knuckles. But again, that's very much something you can choose at your own discretion. I just like a chunky cat's foot on my hybrid animals. To connect the ankle to the upper leg, I had to do a few extra extrusions here and a bit of repositioning to get it to look right, but that was just a tiny bit of futzing and it didn't really need to take too long. This is very much another thing you kinda have to eyeball for yourself. I had digitigrade cat legs on my secondary monitor to glance at for reference. I created a temporary connection for the hips to attach to the legs, just to make sure that I had the proportions right, going into sculpt mode to smooth and sculpt the legs to keep them close to the reference image. I then got rid of that temporary section so I could give her a proper ass the way I normally do. I closed the gap, did the necessary adding of loop cuts, and shaping is necessary before extruding outwards, but scaling inwards to create a convex curve. After that is just eyeballing the fixes, sculpting is necessary. This method of modeling convex curve forms has its issues, but if you know what an ass looks like, you really shouldn't have too many problems fixing it. At any rate, it's a good excuse to have images of butts open on your secondary screen. After a few sculpting fixes to the legs, just to finalize the shape of the crotch and the hips, I begin to close off all of the open edges at the bottom where the toes are. I do an inset for each of them, and then pull them downwards so I don't fuck the infrastructure of this bit up too much, then extrude them outward along the Y, maybe twice, and adding loop cuts for extra chunkiness. I then inflate and sculpt each toe out, so the foot looks nice. I add claws extending outwards from the toes instead of making them nails this time. I just think it looks less awkward this way. Once the legs were done, I got started on the wings. Since I haven't really detailed the way I do a properly winged creature on this channel, I figure I may as well go into it a little bit here too. I know we've hit on floating wings a few times, but adjoined wings where there's a bit of connective tissue are different. You have to decide where the connection point is and model outward from that foundation. I always choose a small group of quads, usually 2 by 2, but in this case I think it was 3 by 2, just off the side of the shoulder joint to start building this foundation. After insetting these faces, I extrude out backwards and start planning out the wing. Now this often takes a lot of time because wings are just kind of hard to make from scratch. I have to futz a lot with the foundation's edges, adding in more as necessary, playing with vertex placement. It's another thing you kind of have to eyeball, unfortunately. I didn't even keep these ones, to be honest. What you're watching me make, I completely did them over because they didn't look right. But with this done, you can finally start extruding out sideways so that you have that wing bit that everything else attaches to. Once I finished this, I began on the feathers. This is very much up to your preference as a character designer and your knowledge of what you want this wing to look like. The initial feather shape I made here, for example, was too soft and fluffy, and I could tell it wouldn't look as nice, so I had to start over and make these sort of pointy, crescent, banana-shaped feathers instead. This is super easy to just sort of approximate and cut into a plane with a knife tool. You can do this by extruding too. I just prefer to do it flat like this and adding structure in later. I then started arranging these along the wingtip to form the bottom layer of the feathers. By the way, I recommend separating each of these layers out by vertex group. It'll make stuff way easier down the road when we start getting to painting. I duplicated this set of bottom feathers and placed them higher up to be the middle tier of the wings. Then to create the big wingtip feather, I attached one of these Chiquita bananas to the wing base and sort of moved the feathers nearest to the base of the spine around so they looked nice with this new and improved bone structure I made. With that, it's time to work on the smaller feathers that go around the big bony bit. I did try to extrude them out from this bit, but they looked like they'd need extra time to get right, and I simply didn't have that kind of time. So I duplicated a big one, shrank it down, and started covering the edge of the bone and tops of the secondary feathers with these tiny little baby ones instead. I duplicate and place these little guys all the way around the wing bone to create the fluffy third layer, and with that I'm done with the wings. Once I finished working on the tail, which was super easy by the way, I'm not going to bother detailing it, it kind of speaks for itself, it came time to Frankenstein some rigs together. Normally I'd do this by hand, but I had time constraints and it made more sense to me to kind of take this shortcut here, as opposed to have to deal with it later down the road. I start by adding a cat meta rig in and tabbing into edit mode to remove the bones that I don't want. In this case, those are the entire front body, so I just selected the hind legs, pelvis, tummy bone, and tail, and deleted the rest before moving the bones into position and situating them inside the model. I also added a few extra bones in the tail for extra fluffy controls. I then added in a human meta rig and did the same thing. Got rid of the bones that I didn't want and repositioned or edited those I did. The ones I wanted for this project were the upper body bones, so all the bones between the hips and the face. I also deleted the facial bones because I find that most facial animation looks better controlled by shape keys anyway, as you can see here. I built out a custom pair of ear bones for her as well. Cat's ears are fairly well known for being quite expressive, and I want her ears to be the same. I parent these to the model's head bone. Finally, we added in a bird meta rig, delete all non-wing bones, situate the skeleton into the mesh, and edit as necessary. And now we can finally get the entire skeleton in order. First, I merged the human and bird skeletons onto the cat skeleton. Some of the wing bones might disappear when you do this, so be sure to check your bone group in the side panel, and be sure to have them all selected to see every bone. This used to drive me crazy. I always thought the bones got deleted or something when I merged them, but they're just hiding. I don't know why Blender does this, but it does, so keep an eye out for it. Make sure you parent all of these new skeletons to existing bones, otherwise your deformations are going to look really silly. I parent the human torso to the base cat bone, and the wings to the appropriate shoulder bones. Once I've done all the parenting, I can start weight painting. It always helps to check the posability first, so I hop into pose mode to find the problem areas and paint in bone influence as necessary. I find this method works super well to find all the real problem areas like the ears and the wings. Once I've got the weight distributed nicely, I made the eyelashes and the brows. We don't need to get too deep into this. You'll have seen me do this a billion times. It's just subdivided cubes extruded around to mimic lashes and brows. Her hair is just a bunch of tiny cylinders extruded down and around the head. I added a bead on the end of each braid by extruding a few faces outwards before going back inwards to finish the braid off. I parent both these and the lashes and brows to her head bone, so it's the only bone that controls these objects. To start on her clothes, I duplicate her chest and shoulders. Separate this into a new object, scale along the normals with Alt-S, and close up the gap around the boobs, so she doesn't look vacuum sealed in there, before hitting Apply Modifier on the mirror mod. From there, I head in with the knife tool and begin cutting a new neck hole shape for the dress. The reference image here has an asymmetrical neck with one shoulder strap, so we're using the knife tool to approximate this. If any n-gons remain when you're done cutting this top bit, be sure to connect any verts to create only quads and tris. This top is already rigged, but it will help the deformations a lot to keep them neat like that. To create her dress, it's largely the same. Duplicate from under where the bottom of the top hits, just under the boobs here in my case, down to the top of the hips, then separate and apply mirror modifier. Since she has that asymmetrical skirt layering, we'll need to edit each side separately. Scale this guy along normals too, but make sure it doesn't intersect with the top. This bit is super simple, just extend the skirt downwards, mimicking the curves of the model and making sure they don't intersect with the hips. I recommend doing the bottom skirt first. It's a bit less of a pain to work bottom up in this case because the skirt is layered. Do this as many times on whichever side you want until the skirts are layered how you like. I followed my reference and gave her 2 skirts on one side and 1 skirt on the other. Her accessories are pretty self-explanatory, so I won't go over them too much. Just enjoy the vibes of the music. By the way, all of the music featured in today's video is by Michael Levy here on YouTube. I'll be linking the video I got this music from, as well as the Spotify playlist below in the doobly-doo, so go check him out. I think he composes these all himself, and he's pretty good, so definitely check him out if you like historically inspired music. With the model done and dusted, it's time to get to the painting. I went in and added seams first, since that's what makes your model look nice when it's painted. I should have done this as I went and not left it until the end, it would have been easier to seam and paint had I only had to do it once and then repeat around the head ad nauseum. Most of my paint time lapses take maybe 4 hours before I speed them up in editing, but this took double that, and it's most likely because I didn't take the time to just duplicate painted braids with seams in already. Quick reminder here that you can get all of the files associated with this model, as well as any other ones that I've made or will make in the future, over on my Patreon. Link in the description! Outside of the braids though, everything went by super quick. I tried to make sure that light and shadow were pushed a lot for contrast in the hands and around the face specifically. I tried to be mindful of making her look too ashy, as that's something that a lot of people have trouble with when rendering darker skin. I gave her more feline eyes to match the more feline vibe of the Sphinx, and I think the eyes really bring out the brighter pink undertones of the skin, and the pink inner ears and toe beans really help to bring that across. Once I had the human skin looking mostly seamless, I began working on the lion bits. I added a sort of gradient from the ankles to the toes to add a little bit of extra emphasis, similar to the hands, and all throughout the furry bits tried to maintain a sort of like just a subtle modeling to make it look like there was like an overlap of like fur on fur on fur, you know, how like how furry creatures look. It's a little bit hard to explain, but I'm trying to imply the grain of the fur here using just flat painted textures. For the clothes, I referred back to the original work by Ben Jor, painting in the textiles and a few shadows here and there to sell forms a little bit better. And then I spent a good 4 hours on the hair. Around midway through, I decided to split the materials so the beads could be more metallic and reflective, and that helped cut the time down somewhat, but honestly, not by a lot. I should have really just focused on painting 2 or 3 of them, and then duplicated it instead. I'm blaming this in part for why the video was nearly late. I painted 40 or 50 of these braids by hand. My back was killing me by the time I finished. Once I got in a deep tissue back massage and slept a good 16 hours, I went back in to paint the final little bits, her accessories. After a quick assessment of which things should have extra detailing and which things I could just leave as is, I painted some turquoise onto the earrings and necklace beads, just as some nice contrast and to pick up the bluer tones on the bottom of the skirt. But now she's all done and dusted, and here's the reveal. This has to be one of my favorite models I've ever made so far. She animates perfectly, looks just like how I envisioned her when I sketched the reference, and pays homage to like 3 different ancient cultures without looking too much like a cultural mishmash. I'm really pleased with this outcome. She and all her associated texturing files will be available to patrons on the 30th, along with this cute little 3D printable model. As always, thank you so much for spending 45 minutes of your time with me here while I worked on this model. I hope you picked up some new techniques that you can implement into your workflow, but if you're just somebody who likes to vibe, I'm glad to be your background music too. I hope you osmosed something new here via the vibes of this model time-lapse video. Stay frosty out there, guys, and I'll see you next month with something hopefully a lot less rushed. Bye!